My grandpa died without leaving a will. My dad inherited the entire estate and sneered at me. You won't get a single cent. Your brother will be the next heir. Then a stranger showed up and whispered, it's time to tell them who you really are. My father said it loud enough for the whole family to hear. You won't get a single cent. He was standing on my grandfather's porch, still wearing his funeral suit, and he smiled when he said it. The particular smile of a man who has been waiting a long time to say a specific thing and has finally found the occasion. Cole's the next heir. That's how this works. A few cousins laughed, the nervous kind. Nobody argued. I was standing in the yard with a paper plate of food I hadn't touched, and my grandfather's green ledger under my arm, because I had taken it from his desk that morning before anyone else arrived, and I wasn't sure yet why, only that it felt like the right thing to hold on to. I didn't argue either. That surprised him. I could see it in the flicker behind his eyes, the expectation of a scene, of tears, of me making myself small in the way daughters of men like Dale May have generally learned to make themselves small. Instead, I looked at him for a moment, nodded once, and went back inside to help clear the casseroles. My grandfather was 3 days in the ground. The fight for what he built was already underway. I just wasn't fighting the way anyone expected. My grandfather was Walter Eugene May, and he built the May Feed and Supply Store in Calder County from a loan he couldn't afford, and a piece of land everyone told him was too far from the highway to matter. That was 1971. By the time I was born, he had expanded twice, added a small equipment rental operation, and become the kind of business that a rural county organizes itself quietly around, the place where farmers settled debts, where neighbors ran tabs that Walt forgave in bad years without being asked, where the same families came in 3 generations running because Walt May knew your grandfather's name and your father's planting schedule and exactly which brand of fence post you preferred. He was not a complicated man. He was an honest one, which is a different and rarer thing. I started keeping his books when I was 11 years old. Not as a lesson. Walt wasn't sentimental about work. He was practical about it. His bookkeeper had retired, and I had shown, in whatever way 11-year-olds show things, that I had a head for numbers and a temperament for accuracy. So he handed me the green ledger and showed me his system and said, the books don't lie. People do. Your job is to make sure the books stay truer than the people. I thought it was just something old men said. I was wrong about that. I kept those books for 22 years. Every bag of feed, every equipment rental, every vendor payment, every account receivable, every forgiven debt marked in red with a small notation in Walt's handwriting. Good man, bad year, beside the ones he'd chosen to absorb. I knew the financial history of that store the way some people know their own childhoods. By feel, by texture, by the accumulated weight of years of small true things. My father, Dale May, was Walt's only son. He was 61 years old and had spent most of his adult life in the orbit of his father's business without ever fully committing to it. Present enough to have opinions, absent enough to have avoided accountability. He had a son, my brother Cole, who was 28 and pleasant and thoroughly uninterested in feed stores or ledgers or the particular unglamorous work of keeping a family business alive. Cole wanted to flip houses. That was fine. That was Cole. What was not fine was what my father decided to do the week after my grandfather died. What was not fine was that I was a paralegal, probate and estates. 8 years at Gentry and Marsh Legal Associates, the only firm in Calder County that handled estate litigation, which meant I had spent 8 years watching families do to each other the things that grief and money, in combination, cause families to do. I knew exactly what was coming. I just didn't know yet how bad it already was. Walt died on a Tuesday morning in October. Cardiac event, sudden, at home, the kind of death that is merciful in its speed and brutal in everything else. By Friday, Dale had retained an attorney. Not just any attorney. He hired Carson Voss, who operated out of a glass front office in the county seat and had a reputation, carefully cultivated, for moving estate matters through probate with minimal oversight and maximum efficiency. In my professional experience, minimal oversight in an estate proceeding is a phrase that means different things depending on which side of the ledger you're on. I found out about the filing on Monday morning when my supervising attorney, Janet Gentry, 24 years in probate litigation, the kind of woman who keeps her certifications current and her notes meticulous, came to my desk and set a document in front of me without a word. My father had filed to become sole administrator of Walt's estate. The filing represented the estate as intestate. Intestate, meaning no will. I read it twice. Walt May, who had owned a business for 50 years, who had a deed and a mortgage and equipment leases and vendor contracts and an account at First Calder Bank that he'd held since 1974. Walt May, according to my father's filing, had died without a will. My stomach did something that I will not describe as a feeling, because it wasn't a feeling. It was recognition. The specific recognition of someone who has processed enough probate filings to know exactly what this was. You can't be on this case, Janet said quietly. I know, I said, but you can still send a letter. I looked at her. She went back to her office and closed the door. I sent Voss a formal letter that afternoon. Certified mail, return receipt requested. The kind of correspondence that creates a dated paper trail whether the recipient wants one or not. The letter requested a full estate inventory, itemized, within the standard statutory window. It was polite. It was precise. It was the kind of letter that only means one thing. I know how this works. His response arrived 4 days later. No inventory. A single paragraph informing me that my request represented an inappropriate intrusion into a family estate proceeding during an active period of grief, and that further contact of this nature might be characterized as harassment. I read it at my kitchen table at 7:14 in the morning with a cup of coffee I had stopped tasting 20 minutes earlier. People with nothing to hide hand you the inventory. I set the letter down and opened Walt's green ledger to the last page of entries I had made before he died and sat with it for a long time. Then I started making calls. The first thing I did was contact the Calder County Probate Court directly and request a copy of every document filed in the the estate proceeding. This is public record. This is something anyone can do. Voss knew that, which meant the confidence of his response had a different source. The filing listed Walt's assets as the store building, the adjacent lot, the family home on Route 9, the equipment inventory, and the operating accounts. No mention of Riverbend, the 12-acre parcel on the River Bend that Walt had owned since 1988, and talked about leaving to the family the way people talk about something they consider beyond ordinary commerce. Land you keep, not sell. Riverbend wasn't in the filing. I searched the county deed records the next morning. It took me 40 minutes. Riverbend Holdings LLC had taken title to the Riverbend parcel 22 days after Walt's death. The sale price was $47,000. The county assessor's most recent valuation was $141,000. The registered agent for Riverbend Holdings LLC was a man named Gerald Pruitt, who, according to the Secretary of State's business registry, shared a mailing address with my father's personal accountant. I sat with that document for a long time. My hands were flat on the desk, completely still. I have learned, over 8 years of probate work, to keep very still when I find things, because stillness is what keeps your mind working and your emotions from running ahead of your evidence. My father had sold Walt's Riverland to a company he controlled at a third of market value 22 days after the funeral. I drove to Janet's house that evening and laid it all out on her kitchen table. She read everything twice, the way she reads everything, and then she made coffee and sat across from me and said the thing I already knew. You need a separate attorney. This can't come from our firm. I know. And you need the will, Avery. Without the original will, the copy isn't worth the paper. She stopped. What copy? I hadn't told her yet about the woman at my door. She had knocked on a Wednesday evening, 9 days after I'd sent the letter to Voss. I almost didn't answer. I'd been sitting with Walt's ledger and a yellow legal pad covered in notes, and the specific exhaustion that comes from rebuilding a financial picture that someone has deliberately obscured. She was in her 70s. Sensible wool coat, the kind that suggests practicality over fashion. Patient eyes, the kind that have seen enough of human behavior to have stopped being surprised by most of it. She introduced herself as Ruth Calloway and said she had been Harold Hewitt's notary for 31 years. Harold Hewitt was the attorney who had drafted Walt's documents for the last 2 decades of his life. He died the previous spring, at 83, after a long illness. I saw the obituary, she said. Then I saw the probate notice. She paused, choosing her words. The filing represented the estate as if Walter died intestate. Yes, I said. That is not correct, she said. I stamped the pages myself. 6 years ago last March, she held out an envelope. Inside was a conformed copy of Walt's last will and testament, the notary's certified copy, the one made at the time of execution and kept as part of the official record of the notarization. Ruth's stamp was on every page. Her journal entry, she told me, documented the date, the document type, Walt's signature, and the names of the 2 witnesses. The will divided the store and the home place equally between Cole and me. Dale received a cash distribution from the operating accounts, substantial, fair, and emphatically not the entirety of the estate, not the kingdom, not the crown. He was very clear about his intentions, Ruth said. He said he'd watched too many families fight over things that got handed to the wrong person. He wanted to make sure the books went to the person who kept them. I had to look at the wall for a moment. Why did you wait? I asked. It's been almost 3 months. She looked at me with the patience of someone who has known a lot of grief in her professional life. I wanted to be sure, she said. I wanted to know what kind of person would fight it. She paused. You sent the certified letter. You requested the inventory. He didn't respond with the inventory. No, she said. He didn't. She pulled her coat closed. It's time to tell them who you really are, Avery. Walt knew. That's why he wrote it the way he wrote it. She left. I sat at my kitchen table with the conformed copy for 2 hours before I moved. I retained Eleanor Marsh the next morning. Eleanor Marsh was Janet Gentry's former partner. They'd split the firm 7 years ago when their practice areas diverged, Janet into estate litigation, Eleanor into civil and appellate work. Eleanor was 56, had argued before the state Supreme Court 4 times, and had a quality in her voice during difficult conversations that I can only describe as geological. She sounded like someone who has existed long enough to have perspective on short-term problems. I walked her through everything: the intestate filing, the Riverbend transfer, Voss's non-response, Ruth Calloway, and the conformed copy. Eleanor read the conformed copy with the same focused stillness that good attorneys bring to documents that matter. The copy is probative, she said. It's significant evidence of the will's existence, but a conformed copy doesn't replace the original for purposes of admission to probate. She looked up. The law presumes that a missing will was revoked by the testator, intentionally destroyed. Walt didn't destroy it, I said. I believe you, but belief isn't a legal standard. She set the copy down. We need to establish that the will existed, that Walt didn't destroy it, and that someone else did, preferably with evidence that points to who. I know where Walt kept his important documents, I said. Where? Floor safe, back office of the store. I paused. He changed the combination every 2 years. Wrote it in the ledger in a notation system he taught me when I was 12. I paused again. My father changed the lock after Walt died. Eleanor was quiet for a moment. How do you know he changed the lock? I don't. Yet. I called every locksmith operating in Calder County and the 2 adjacent counties. There were 11 of them. I worked through the list over 2 evenings, explaining each time that I was conducting research for a probate matter and that I needed to know if any of them had performed work on a floor safe at the May Feed and Supply property after the 1st of October. Quick pause. If you want more stories like this in better quality, my Spotify's linked in the description. The 3rd call into my 2nd evening, a man named Bert Granger answered. He ran a one-man operation out of a shop on Route 14, had been in the business for 37 years, and had the particular directness of someone who has never felt the need to manage other people's reactions. The May place, Yes, he said without hesitation. Sure. Floor safe in the back office. Drill safe 400 series. Older model. Good luck. Who hired you? Work orders right here. I heard paper. Dale May. Paid cash. When? He read me the date. 11 days after the funeral. 11 days. Long enough to arrive at the property. Long enough to open the safe with the combination, which he would have had to get from somewhere. And the ledger notation system that Walt had taught me was not something Dale had ever been part of. Or long enough to discover he didn't have the combination and needed it drilled. Long enough to remove whatever was inside. Long enough to install a new lock and keep the combination to himself. Can I get a copy of that work order? I said. It's a business record, Bert said. You can subpoena it if you need to. Thank you, I said. Don't thank me, he said. Just make sure whoever's on the right side of this wins. I sat in my empty kitchen after I hung up and looked at the wall for a long time. He didn't lose the will. The thought arrived fully formed, the way conclusions arrive when the evidence has been building long enough. He opened the safe, found it, read it, and decided he didn't like what it said. Then he drilled the lock and changed it so no one could verify what had been inside. My father. My father had read his own father's final wishes and decided they were wrong. The crisis came not from one direction but from three, simultaneous, in the space of 48 hours. The first, Voss filed a motion to accelerate the estate settlement. The motion cited family discord and administrative uncertainty as grounds for expediting the distribution. If Judge Hollis granted it, the estate could be distributed before Eleanor could mount a full challenge. We had, Eleanor estimated, 72 hours to file a formal will contest and request an evidentiary hearing. The second, Dale moved to liquidate the store's equipment inventory. 12 items, including 3 tractors and a commercial seed drill, listed for auction. The auction was scheduled for that Saturday. The equipment was part of the estate. Liquidating it before settlement could argued as waste of estate assets, but only if we filed in time. The third, and this one I found at 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday, going through the remaining store financial records I'd quietly copied before Dale changed the office locks, was worse than the first two. The operating accounts had been paying legal fees, not Walt's legal fees, Dale's. The fees Voss was charging to administer the estate, which included, buried in the billing records I was looking at on my kitchen floor with every light in the house on, charges for adversarial correspondence management and estate interest protection that were, translated from attorney billing language, the cost of Voss fighting me on Dale's behalf, charged to Walt's own accounts. Walt was paying for his own robbery. I called Eleanor at 11:53 p.m. She answered on the second ring, which told me she'd been awake. Tell me, she said. I told her. Scan everything, she said. Every page. Email it to me by 2 a.m. I'll have the filing ready for morning. Eleanor, I know, she said. Get scanning. I scanned 41 pages on my home printer at a pace that felt geological and sent them at 1:38 a.m. Then I sat on my kitchen floor with Walt's green ledger in my lap and the particular stillness of someone who has done everything they can do tonight and now has to wait. I opened the ledger to the last entry I had ever made in it. October 3rd, a routine accounts receivable entry. Walt had been alive when I wrote it. I had been in this kitchen when I wrote it, on a Tuesday evening, and he had called me that night about something unrelated, a vendor dispute, and I had said I'd look into it Thursday. He died on Tuesday. I never looked into it. I set the ledger down and looked at the ceiling for a long time. Then I got up, made coffee, and started building my exhibit list. The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning. Courtroom B of the Calder County Civil Court. Judge Diana Hollis presiding. 21 years on the bench. A reputation for impatience with procedural delay and a precision in her questioning that made unprepared attorneys visibly uncomfortable. Half the county came. I am not being dramatic. The May family had been in Calder County for 3 generations. The feed store was a landmark. Walt's death had been noticed, grieved, marked. And news of a contested estate in a county of this size travels faster than the legal filings that document it. By 9:15 a.m., the gallery was full. Aunts, cousins, men who had known Walt for 50 years and driven in from their farms to sit in the wooden benches of Courtroom B on a Thursday morning because it mattered to them what happened to what he'd built. Dale walked in at 9:22 with Voss at his shoulder. He was wearing a sport coat and the expression of a man who considers the room an extension of his living room. When he spotted me at the plaintiff's table beside Eleanor, he paused in the aisle. Still chasing your fairy tale, he said. He said it for the gallery, loud enough to carry. And then he smiled the same smile from the porch after the funeral. You won't get a single cent. Same line. Exact. Like a man who'd found something he loved and couldn't stop. I didn't answer. I had a thin folder, Walt's green ledger, and 8 years of professional experience with the specific document that Eleanor was about to introduce. I arranged my papers and waited. Ruth Calloway testified first. She took the stand in her sensible coat and laid her notary journal on the railing beside her with the care of someone who has maintained a professional record for 31 years and understands its weight. Eleanor walked her through it. The date of execution, March 14th, 6 years prior. The document type, Walt's signature. The names of the 2 witnesses. Her official seal. Do you have any uncertainty about this entry? Eleanor asked. None, Ruth said. Voss rose for cross-examination with the affect of a man who had handled older witnesses before and had a method. Ms. Calloway, isn't it possible your journal entry contains a clerical error? That you may have misrecorded the document type? Ruth looked at him with the patience of someone who has been a notary for 31 years and has heard this kind of question before. I don't recall it from memory, she said. I recorded it in the journal at the moment of execution. That is the entire purpose of the journal. The journal does not misrecord. That is also the entire purpose of the journal. A sound moved through the gallery, not quite a laugh, the suppressed cousin of one. Voss sat down. I took the stand next. Eleanor had prepared me, not in the way of coaching, but in the way of good attorneys who understand that their best witnesses are the ones who tell their own truth in in their own voice without embellishment. She told me to speak slowly, to address the judge, to let the documents do the heavy lifting. I didn't raise my voice once. I walked Judge Hollis through the documents in order. Eleanor projected each one on the courtroom screen as I introduced it. First, Burt Granger's work order, Dale May's name, the date, 11 days post-funeral. The job description, floor safe, drill safe 400, back office, Mayfeed and supply. Lock replaced at customer's request. The gallery was completely still. Second, the Riverbend deed transfer. The recorded sale price of $47,000. The county assessor's valuation of $141,000. The registered agent of Riverbend Holdings LLC and his documented connection to my father's accountant. Third, the attorney billing records. Voss's fees charged to Walt's operating accounts. The line items for adversarial correspondence management. The total, $11,340, paid from Walt's money to defend the man who was contesting Walt's will. Fourth, the green ledger. I carried it to the stand myself. I had flagged the pages, the vendor records, the accounts receivable, the debt forgiveness entries. I had also flagged the page from 2003 where Walt, in his own handwriting, had written his combination notation system and explained it to me in a margin note that read, "For Avery's use only." That page was not something Dale would have known existed, which meant to access the safe, he'd had to drill it, which Burt Granger's work order confirmed he had. I set the ledger on the railing and I looked at my father for the first time since I'd taken the stand. He was watching me with an expression I had not seen from him before. Not anger, something more complicated. The look of a man who has just understood that his daughter is not what he thought she was, and that this understanding has arrived too late to matter. "You taught me that the books don't lie," I said. "I'm reading from the page you forgot to change." The gallery held its breath. And then Dale May stood up. Later, people who were there would describe it differently. Some said he shouted. Some said his voice was more of a breaking, the sound a structure makes when the thing holding it together gives. What I remember is that he was on his feet before Voss could stop him, one hand on the back of his chair, his face a color I didn't have a word for. "She's twisting everything," he said. Loud. Too loud. The gallery kind of loud that you cannot take back. "I only fixed what should have been mine. The old man never should have put that girl over his own son. Not his son. I built my life around that store." Voss closed his eyes. "You cannot argue in open court that a will never existed, and then in the same breath describe the will's contents as unjust. You cannot argue that Walt died intestate while expressing grievance about Walt's testamentary choices. These two positions cannot exist simultaneously. They cancel each other out." And Carson Voss, who was a competent attorney, understood this in the moment Dale said it, which is why his eyes close the way they close when you know something irrecoverable has just happened. Judge Hollis let the silence sit for exactly one beat. The kind of silence that a judge with 21 years on the bench knows how to use. Then she looked at Dale. Then she reached for her pen. "I will tell you what happened precisely, without editorializing." Judge Hollis ordered a full halt to all estate distributions pending a full evidentiary hearing on the will's validity. She ordered Dale removed as administrator and appointed a neutral third-party administrator, Margaret Vick, a certified estate administrator with 19 years of experience and an office in the county seat, to manage the estate during the proceedings. She referred Dale's outburst, and the documentary records supporting it, to the county district attorney's office for review of potential criminal charges. The referral cited the circumstantial evidence of will suppression and the Riverbend transaction for potential investigation under the state's Elder Financial Exploitation Statute. Voss withdrew from the case 4 days later. His withdrawal letter cited irreconcilable differences in litigation strategy. In legal translation, he was not going down with the ship. The district attorney's investigation took 7 months. I will not describe those months in full because they were long and exhausting and involved multiple conversations with an investigator named Garrett Cole, 12 years in financial crimes, methodical, skeptical of everyone in equal measure, who interviewed me 3 separate times and made clear each time that his skepticism was professional rather than personal. Dale was charged with fraudulent suppression of a will and elder financial abuse in connection with the Riverbend transfer. The Riverbend transaction was unwound. The land returned to the estate at fair market value, the difference disgorged. The estate billing records were referred to the state bar for a separate disciplinary review of Voss's conduct. The will was admitted to probate. Walt's intentions, expressed 6 years before his death, were given effect. Cole got his half of the store and the home place. He didn't want to run the store. He called me a few weeks after the settlement and said he'd like to sell his interest. I told him I'd buy it at fair value. We agreed on a number. I am the sole owner of Mayfeed and Supply. 3 months after the settlement, I drove to the store on a Tuesday morning and unlocked the front door the way Walt had shown me to do it. Key, then the secondary latch, then the alarm code, and stood in the doorway for a moment before I went in. The store smelled the way it had always smelled. Feed and oil and old wood and something underneath those things that I don't have a name for. The accumulated smell of 50 years of honest work. I walked to the back office. The drill safe 400 was still there. Different lock. My combination now. I sat down at the desk and opened the green ledger to a clean page. New entry, new column headings, new accounts. My handwriting not Walt's, but in the same columns he'd taught me, with the same system, because it was a good system, and because there was no reason to change something that had always told the truth. I picked up the pen. The books don't lie, Walt used to say. People do. He was the most honest person I ever knew. He put it in writing. He made sure someone was left who understood what the writing meant. I was that person. I had always been that person. He just wanted to make sure everyone else knew it too.